Wishing you all a super warm welcome to Connecting with Purpose, where we connect with winners and thought leaders from multiple sectors to provide you with a 360-degree view on purpose. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Our purpose, to inspire you to unlock your potential and optimize your performance and impact. Welcome to Connecting with Purpose, episode number 5, where we welcome a good friend of mine, Mike Geddes, who is the Chief Purpose Officer at the Oakland Roots Soccer Club. I've known Mike for many years, actually. We shared some work together in the sports-based social impact sectors for a number of years. His primarily focused on using a soccer ball, mine with a rugby ball, but given soccer's the biggest sport in the world, I can't really hold that against him. Mike's enjoyed an incredible career, purpose-driven, really at every turn, right from early days being a BBC soccer reporter through to leading one of the senior leaders with a global non-profit organisation called Street Football World, which did some incredible work with underserved communities around the globe using soccer, including working on the social legacy for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. Mike is currently co-founder and Chief Purpose Officer for the Oakland Roots, which happens to be the first pro sports team in the USA to be founded purely on purpose. So, Mike, welcome to Connecting with Purpose. What a great guest.
Thanks, Mark. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So if you've seen any of our previous episodes of this, you know what's coming, which is that I'd like you to challenge yourself to look back on your career, which obviously has been super interesting and must have been some amazing highlights and very fulfilling. But if you had to narrow it down to sort of 3 magic moments that just sort of spring to mind for you, what would they be? And I'll just give you a little context around magic moments, that they are a benchmark experience in your life. If you have to give it a score, you give it a 10 out of 10. And if you were therefore to come up with 3 of those, what name would you give each of them, and what is it that made them a magic moment?
Yeah, well, I guess we have to put aside things like birth of your child and things and kind of just take it as read that those things are 10 out of 10 moments. And I'll talk about my career now, just in case the wife is listening.
You're not the first person that said that, Mike. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I think I always talk about the first moment because it was the time when I really started to divert from the path that I was on. The path I was on, you talked about my earlier career as a reporter, and I was very fortunate to do a job that I loved, reporting on soccer, basically, for the BBC. So I was in Mozambique making a documentary about a guy called Carlos Queiroz, who at that time was the assistant coach of Manchester United and is from Mozambique, which I found quite interesting. And I was making a documentary with him about his roots and where he came from. And we were halfway through a journey through the country up to a village in the north where he was born. And we were shooting the sunrise in a place called Mozambique Island, which is a really magical place. It's an old colonial fort that has been abandoned and then reclaimed, and now has its own community. It sits out on the bay in these beautiful kind of blue waters in the north of Mozambique. And we were getting shots of the sunrise as you do, and setting up the cameras and waiting for the sun to come up, and a couple of kids came and sat down next to us, and the cameraman and I thought, well, this is they just haven't seen white people before, or they're interested to know what we're doing. And then a couple of more kids came, and a couple of more kids came, and a couple of more kids came, and there's about 20 of them. Eventually we thought, well, we're not this interesting. I mean, we're not doing anything, we just got a camera set up. And then the sun came up and the kids all got up and started playing football, and they didn't stop until the sun went back down again. And it really sort of made me realize at that time, wow, this sport, this thing, which, at that time I was involved in the elite level of it, the Premier League and things, and that was exciting. But I thought, God, this thing is way more powerful than I actually believed or understood. And that moment was definitely, let's call it, I don't know, awakening, if that's not too trite. Definitely was a light bulb moment for me. Call it light bulb if that's better. And that really got me thinking that this work that I was very privileged to do, or this thing that I was immersed in, football, soccer, was way more than just a sport. It was a incredibly powerful social phenomenon. And I started to think differently then about how I wanted to use my time. So fast forward from that a little bit, and I think you talked a bit about the social legacy of the World Cup in South Africa. And one of the things that we did was we organized a tournament, almost like a mini World Cup, during the World Cup in South Africa, but for kids from programs using soccer as a tool for social change. So we also brought 32 teams, and we also had a soccer tournament, but these were all kids from, street kids from Cambodia or from Iraq or from Rwanda or from, Kennington in London, and a very different type of tournament. But the idea behind it was to celebrate the social power of the game on the same level as the global celebration that is the World Cup. And the World Cup in South Africa, there were a lot of comments about how the game wasn't touching the majority of the population. The majority of the population couldn't access the tickets, couldn't access the game. So we chose to take our event into a township called Alexandra in the center of Johannesburg. So the challenge of bringing that level of event into a community like Alexandra during the World Cup and accommodating all the demands of FIFA was enormous. It took us 3 years. But being there as the South African president and all these people were there opening the event in this township, in a place that otherwise the World Cup would never have gone there, was definitely, and I'm trying to think of a one-word answer to name this one. That was, man, I don't know. I mean, we were proud of that moment. It was an achievement, but it also felt like this is scratching the surface. It was a milestone. Call it a milestone. How's that, Mark? Because it really brought home what was possible, but it also opened up, what else we thought we could do. And the next phase for me from that moment was, we'd done a lot of work on the straight charity side, if you like, so, okay, here's the World Cup, this elite level event, and now let's do something alongside it, which is kind of a nod to this other purpose the game has. And that was how that type of work was approached. It was not an afterthought, but it wasn't the main event, right? It was, okay, we've done our real work, and now here's something for the kids, if you like. And that felt incomplete to me. I didn't feel like the journey was going to be complete until you had thought about, well, how do you reform the business model, essentially? And that purpose revolution, as it's often termed, was just getting going then in business, still didn't really exist in sports. To think, we can do however much charity good we like, but if we don't reform the fundamental models which we've built our society on, they're going to collapse. And so that started me then on a journey of trying to find a way to impact the actual business of sport and think about how can I, again, working within my passion, how can I try and make the business a better place and therefore the planet a better place. And again, lots of fast forwarding, but the Oakland Roots, which I didn't move to Oakland intending to start a football club, but it happened because when I moved here and met the other co-founders who are from this area, and they told me about the idea, it sort of it was everything that I'd wanted to do. Starting something and embedding purpose in the beginning, and I think the moment there of the sort of magic moment there was our very first game. From a sporting perspective, it wasn't a success. We were 3-0 up after 20 minutes and we drew 3-3. So sporting wise, it was a disaster. But honestly, it was like we'd won the World Series because the stadium was packed out. We didn't know if anyone would come. I mean, we were a independent minor league soccer team in a city that had not had a soccer team for many, many years, that had the Golden State Warriors next door, the Oakland A's next door, the Raiders still at that time, brand new, no track record, just a bunch of normal people, no billionaires, and had no clue if anyone would show up for the game. And it was packed out. We had about 4,000 or 5,000 people in the stadium, and it was very, very special. Seeing that many people come out and turn up and show up because of the purpose, because at that time that's all we'd had to promise them, was a great moment. And I'm trying to think of a nice pithy one worder for that, but I don't know. You'll have to come up with that one for me, I think, Mark. But those, I think, are three moments that definitely stand out. I'm sure there's many more.
Well, I don't. If I did say I was limiting you to one word, I apologise, because I'm going to use three, which is bums on seats.
Great one. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean that's brilliant that you said that you genuinely feel they turned up because of the purpose. Yeah. So what was it that attracted them about the purpose? Like, how did you share that with the community? And to what extent do you think that was the hook that got them intrigued and kind of came along in numbers like that? That's an amazing start.
Yeah. So we were very, when we talk, a lot of people talk about being purpose driven, and it is easy to talk about it. What we tried to do was, instead of, what happens a lot in sports, I think, is that the structures have evolved over, sometimes hundreds of years. And, at a certain point, it was part of a process in the UK. In America, it was more from the word go. The commercialization of the entity was paramount, right? And what happens a lot, especially what we've seen in the last couple of years, is teams suddenly having to start finding their purpose or kind of reliving their purpose, are trying to adjust, align, make up for bad things that they've done. But at the core, you've got this unchangeable construct, which is often we have a group of investors, or we're floated on the stock market and we need to make money. And if that's at your core, it's challenging sometimes to make decisions which might run counter to the purely, base level extractive model of capitalism. Don't get me wrong, we have investors, we absolutely do, but our investors have bought into the idea that at our core is our purpose, which is to harness the magic of Oakland and the power of sports as a force for social good. And what we've tried to do is build that into the structure of the organization, the fabric. I mean, I have a job because of that purpose. Other sports teams don't have a chief purpose officer. We have one because we feel that it is essential to invest at that level, so that you stay true to it. And then we also have, structures of the organization and decision-making processes which ensure that purpose is not just sitting on a wall or in an employee handbook and never actually actualized. And that was our goal from the beginning, and we obviously tried to apply that philosophy to the specific city of Oakland, which is a city that, like many others, has suffered a lot at the hands of society, gentrification, its sports teams, ownerships groups. They've been the sports fans, I would say, are used to being treated badly, and it's a very proud town. Similar. I grew up in Leeds. See a lot of similarities with how proud people are of the city sports teams, and that's what people want. They want a team which they feel cares about them and that represents their values as well. And so that's what we wanted to create, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't limiting our appeal to people who just were fans of soccer. I mean, we want those people, absolutely, but we also didn't just want those people, because here in the United States, the typical kind of soccer demographic is not representative of the society as a whole. Various reasons for that, and how the game is administered here, or how it has historically been run, which creates geographic, financial, and social and cultural barriers to people of color. So we wanted to make sure that it was a team for everyone, that it was a team that appealed to Oaklanders first, even if they weren't soccer fans before, because their goal is that if they come and they engage with the team because they like Oakland, then maybe they'll become soccer fans, and that's great for us. So we were very blessed to have very talented people who understood how to take that concept and turn it into something tangible, into a brand. And we spent a long time listening to people. We didn't rush into, and this is a mistake I think a lot of teams make. We didn't rush into like putting out the brand. Here's our logo. here's the explanation of why you should care about this logo. We didn't put anything out until we felt we knew what people wanted to see. And then we were, again, fortunate to have talented people who could bring that to life. And yeah, I mean, we partnered, for example, with a local social enterprise, which is a clothing brand called Oaklandish, as our lifestyle partner. So very well established, people know them, know the brand. We were selling merchandise in their store, and they would say that 50% of people who buy this stuff don't even know it's a soccer team. They think they think it's an Oakland brand, and that's great for us because those are new potential fans. And I would say that, you know, that moment I talked about when at our first game, I think what was truly gratifying was seeing people, seeing a stadium full of people, and it looked like Oakland, and people said it looked like Oakland, you know. And this is a city which has and is struggling against gentrification, against displacement, against input of capital, which is pushing out the original or a lot of the, you know, a lot of the original kind of residents and culture, and people, you know, people want to be proud of the city that they've built, and it felt like they'd come out to our game to celebrate that, which was great, because that's what we want to be. Essentially, we want to be a place where people come together and are happy. You know, when I think about how to quantify the success of the team, for me, it's not winning at number one. It's not making money at number one. Those things are important. Absolutely, we want to do them. We have to do them in order to be successful. But to me, our goal is to contribute to the health, equity, and happiness of the city of Oakland, and we have a role to play in that, which is not the biggest role in the city, but it can work in partnership with all the other actors who are striving for the same thing. And there is an important role, I think, that sports teams have to play in communities, especially these days. You know, you and I are British. We grew up with this concept of teams, clubs being about the community first and foremost. And I think that there is a desire here in the United States to see that approach being given more importance. And it's not just, I don't think it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. I think people will respond and have responded to us positively because we've taken that approach.
Yeah, and I mean, this is so refreshing to hear this, because you know, just not just coming from a business perspective, but from a sports perspective, I think. And I take your point about there's some systemic things that have been done or exist in certain structures, certain businesses, certain franchises that make them incredibly hard to change, or can become an Achilles heel to some sort of change. And so to be able to start fresh with that purpose, obviously, was an incredibly powerful opportunity for you guys, but also one that therefore left you with a lot of responsibility to not mess it up, because you needed to get that feedback. And so when you talk about harnessing the magic of Oakland, and you were having those conversations to try to understand what some of that magic was, what was some of the feedback that was coming back that enabled you to inform not just the purpose statement that you have, but actually how you've been able to bring that to life? So what was some of that feedback you were getting from all of those questions you were asking and the listening you were doing before you pushed the brand out?
Yeah, I mean, you said it there when you talked about you have to get it right. I mean, Oakland is, and I've learned this since I moved here with my family about 6 years ago, it is the best and the worst place you could try to do what we're trying to do. It's the best because it is full of the most brilliant, truly progressive thinkers in terms of how we reimagine our society to be more equitable. I mean, there are people here doing real work in unbelievably challenging circumstances. Some of the most brilliant people I've met. So, the city is steeped in a long history of the fight for social justice, for civil rights. People have seen it, done it. They have very sensitive bullshit meters. Sorry for language. And that's why it's the worst place. You know, you cannot kid anyone here. You have to do it right, and it will hold you to account. But you know, that's also a good thing. It really sort of sharpens your game. You're under pressure all the time. You have to be authentic. I think that's the one thing that people want from their from all their stakeholders, but particularly their sports teams. I mean, they're not the fans here. They don't. And again, I'll making a comparison with coming from Leeds. All right, we're good now, but we've been terrible for a long time. But we still stick with the team, and I think that's the same here. I think people, what they want is a team which believes in them as much as they believe in it, and they can live without winning everything every season, as long as they have that. And that's what they demand, and then that's that is a bigger demand for the team, because you can always make an excuse as to why you didn't win a championship, because there's only one championship winner every season. That's a hard thing to do. Other teams will have more money, other teams will have more luck, whatever it might be, but you can't make an excuse for not being authentic. So you really have to deliver on that, and that's a lot of pressure. And there's been times when we haven't delivered on certain things. I like to think we've always been authentic, even if we weren't successful. But that is a pressure. But it's a pressure we welcome, and I think that the stuff we're learning here, and I know this is informing others. We have other teams asking us, how do we replicate your approach, or how do we learn from what you guys have done in order to build that connection with the community? In terms of what feedback we got, my co-founder uses the term cultural anthropology for the research that we were doing. I mean, it's I wouldn't limit it down to any one specific. I mean, we use this term magic in our purpose statement, and it's vague, and that's intentional. Yeah. I think that using the term magic provides this sort of very broad or big tent into which a lot of things can go, because everyone defines it differently. This concept of what we're trying to capture and represent, and we would never seek to narrowly define it on our terms. It is up to people to define it how they want. But there is certainly a really special quality here, which is a mix of equity, social justice, creativity, grit, hard work, multiculturalism, diversity, all of these things which are encapsulated in Oakland, the good and the bad. There are enormous social challenges here, like in many places in the United States, and that is all part of it, and people are fiercely proud of it, and we are trying to, we, for example, it wasn't just the brand, but even in terms of our value system for our organization, which informs the technical team's decisions on which players we sign, and our system of play. Even our system of play is informed by Oakland. Our technical director will tell you that the type of food or the type of music that is in the Bay Area informs his vision on how our teams should play on the field, because he wants a team that plays in a way that the community responds to, even if they're not winning. So we're really trying to think about it in that level of detail. And we were fortunate, I guess, in that we had about 3 years where this thing was just an idea. No one was putting any money into it. And we were literally had the opportunity just to talk to people about the idea. And we weren't trying to rush something out. It was really a long process of talking and late nights and, pizza shops and bars and, names on blackboards, and community events and just listening, and then, like I said, we were also fortunate enough to have people with the ability to translate all of that into something tangible, and fortunate enough to have people respond to it.
Yeah, which is magic. And I like the fact that you weren't concerned about having a very specific purpose statement. That's not the purpose of a purpose statement, right? It's there to be inspirational. It's there to be a call to action and to galvanize people and to capture their imagination and be something that people care about and something that's memorable to them and something that's meaningful to them. But it's not a plan. It doesn't have all the bullet points of things you need to deliver off the back of it, because that's what might come through in a vision statement and a mission statement and a strategy. But the point is, and why we call purpose fused, is that these things have to be fused together, and that's something that obviously you've done very intentionally from the start. And so you touched on this a little bit already in terms of talking to some of the level of detail. I think it'd be really helpful for people and insightful for you to share maybe some examples of how you've been able to embed the purpose, if you like, throughout the organizational system and beyond into the community and so on and so forth. But any things that stand out to you that you think that have been either good or bad tactics, things that you try to do that are, in an effort to embed purpose, and how did it work and why did it work, and if it didn't, why do you think it didn't work?
Yeah, I will preface this by saying that all of this is a work in progress. None of it is complete. None of it is perfect. We haven't cracked the code completely. This is what we're trying to do because we believe this is the way it should be done. So you're right. We have a purpose statement below so the purpose is the why. It's our North Star. It's why we all get up in the morning. Below that we have our mission statement, which is the how we're going to do it. And then one of the things that I talked about was building, I call it a purpose architecture of the organization, so that everyone clearly understands what is our purpose, what is our mission, what are our values, what are the habits that we want to see that will help us build our culture. And what I've tried to do, and this is quite a recent thing, is connect that structure with our organizational and departmental KPIs, so that everyone in the organization, whichever department you're in, can understand how their daily work is contributing to the overall purpose. I think what happens a lot in sports organizations and many organizations, but particularly in sports, is you have the front office, you have the players, and then you'll have a foundation. The players are there to win, the front office is there to turn that winning into money, and then over here somewhere is the foundation. It's completely disconnected, and the guy selling the tickets or the lady selling the tickets has no incentive to think about that when they're doing their daily work. Their incentive is sell this amount of tickets and you'll make this much commission. And it leads to problems, and it leads to the type of problems we've seen over the last year, where people are calling out the sports world, the sports business world, and saying, these values that you espouse, you're not living them. And it's because people don't feel empowered to make purpose-driven decisions. And so what I've been trying to do as Chief Purpose Officer is make sure that, everyone in the organization understands their role in this overall purpose, because it is everybody. Purpose is not a department. One of the things I've tried to do this year is, people often use the terms purpose or community, interchangeably, and they say community, and it tends to mean anything that's not making money, basically, the charity stuff. But community, why is that the case? Our community is our most important constituent. It's our most important stakeholder, and it encompasses everything that gives us life and makes us who we are. And so I've tried to make sure that everyone in the organization understands this stuff. I wrote it on the wall recently. I wrote the whole kind of like purpose structure and the KPIs out, but then also introduced different artifacts and processes in the organization that help people feel empowered to make those decisions. And, that includes how we screen for candidates for jobs, how we evaluate performance, through our purpose lens, as well as through the straight business KPIs. I believe they're the same, don't get me wrong. Like, purpose KPIs are just business KPIs. And there are ample data now to support that purpose-driven business approaches are more successful. And we're slowly trying to, bring everyone on side with that, because I think sport has lagged in understanding that compared to other parts of the business world. So that's one thing, which is that's the sort of like very intentional daily work to make sure that people's everyday professional experience is guided and structured in a way that it doesn't rely on just individual people going, well, I need to make this decision, but I have a personal opinion on this or that, and I'm going to go one way or the other way. No, you should know how our organization makes these decisions, because that's who we are, and that ultimately is how we're going to be successful. Another thing is our commercial strategy. So one of the first things I did this year, and by the way, I've only been full-time in this role since the start of this year, because I was doing other roles and was part-time up until January 1st. But one of the first things I did was to work with our chief revenue officer to redesign our commercial partnership strategy around our purpose. Again, it's the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do as well, because we are, still a startup essentially. We don't have a track record in the league that we've just gone into. We are a small player in a market with some absolute giants of the sporting world, Golden State Warriors, for example. We need commercial partnerships to survive. That's absolutely true. So what is the value you're giving your commercial partners? Are you giving them a rate card where it's like, here's all the sponsorship assets we've got, and we can get your brand in front of 5,000 people? Well, that's meaningless to a global multi-billion-dollar brand. So we basically said, well, let's reimagine this whole strategy, and let's think about what are brands actually looking for these days? Are they looking for just another way to put an advert around the edge of a pitch for 20 minutes? Why don't we be a bit more authentic and transparent about it, and say, look, let's just find brands which align with our purpose and see if what we've got, which is this kind of unique offering of being a community sports team, can help them with that. So we redesigned our purpose strategy around our purpose and around 5 core pillars where we think a sports team can actually add value in the community, and then went to find partners that aligned with those pillars. And that's been pretty successful. We 10x'd our sponsorship income, and brought in partners that I know, because of how they've come to us, were interested in our purpose before anything else. And we managed to turn that into partnerships. And what we've got in terms of our ability to reach to the community and to tell stories and to create meaningful impact around this very engaging thing, which is a community sports team, is appealing to commercial partners. And as long as you design the partnership in the right way, in an authentic way, then that can work really well. So that I say would be another success. And then I guess another one is, we're the first team in the United States to join Common Goal. Common Goal is a movement created by the people I used to work with, so the sort of non-profit space, and it's essentially 1% for the planet, but for the soccer industry. So it's a few of the world's top athletes giving 1% of their salary to a global fund for social good. And what's interesting about it is, in the same way as 1% for the planet, it's saying, we can do all the charity good we want. If we don't tweak the business model, then it's not going to be sustainable. And you don't have to tweak the business model very far in order to create real benefit and still make as much money as you could possibly need. And we saw that as an opportunity to be the first entire professional team in the United States to join that movement, where our players and our front office staff give 1% of our salaries, plus we give 1% of sponsorship deals and ticket sales to Common Goal. And it's an investment, sure, but it's an investment with huge returns for us, because the ability for us to then be on this level and be in this global conversation would not be present for us if we were just trying to compete or be relevant on a sporting term. Whereas now we're part of this global family, we're part of this very high profile movement, and it also binds together the organization around this common purpose. It's not like, okay, we have a foundation which is doing some good over here. No, all of us are actually personally invested financially, and then hopefully emotionally, in the mission of the club. And one of the great outcomes of that was when we were discussing with the players and the front office, how do we want to use this investment? It was clear that everyone felt that there were some common challenges we needed to address, and racism was high on that list. And so, we said to Common Goal, we want to be the first team in the United States to join, but it's important to us that we are joining in a way which is going to impact an area we think needs more attention. At that time, Common Goal didn't have any specific anti-racist projects, and we said, well, we will use our investment to create one. So here is our commitment, and we would like you to find others to join that in order to create a specific anti-racist project, and that's what happened. And in February this year, we launched the Anti-Racist Project, which brought together teams from across the professional leagues, NWSL, Major League Soccer, There's more teams joining now. There's professional athletes, and that was incredibly powerful and rewarding for us on every level. To see us in the New York Times, that wouldn't have happened without this commitment. And I think it showed people that through a pretty small commitment on our side. I mean, it feels big to us, but 1% is 1%. But by kind of investing in others, investing in something else, investing in a purpose greater than us, we actually generated much more return from us than we could possibly have than is the worth of that investment. So the returns are far greater than the investment. And that project is now going to be rolled out this year, and we'll be able to have our players involved in the implementation of an anti-racist project in their communities, and they were the ones who helped start it. So that's been gratifying and I think a big success for us.
Well, they're three brilliant examples, and what I appreciate about those, Mike, is that starting off with the day-to-day attention to detail in terms of how people support each other, how they hold them accountable, how they're measured, how those measures are integrated into the broader business measures is just business measures, because, as you said, the purpose measures should be no different. But it also speaks to the importance of these external partnerships and how purpose can be essentially a vehicle to help connect you. And one thing I've said for a number of years since I've been in a similar role on the commercial side of sports and rugby was that we have to compete where we can win. And in a similar way to you guys, you can't compete against all the big guys for eyeballs, but you can compete on purpose, because there's probably nobody that can live it in as an authentic way as you can. And the reality is the big brands can create eyeballs and get them from other places. What they want is impact and experiences that are memorable, and connection to the people and to those experiences and to that impact, and demonstrating that their brand is behind that and involved with it and part of it. And that's incredibly valuable. One of the challenges with it, and this is teeing up my next question, is how do you measure some of this stuff, right? So I've got my own take on it, but I'd be interested to know from your side, what are some examples of the things that you're measuring as Chief Purpose Officer that are creating your dashboard for success for the Oakland Roots?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that one of the things that I try to impress upon our ownership is our business metrics are part of our purpose metrics. Our sponsorship income is part of our purpose metrics. Like, it is a direct correlation. It is, so our social impact, if you like, is important, but don't be confused into thinking that that is the purpose outcome. When I think about our impact, I'm thinking about the financial health of the organization, the equity in our employees. Are our employees happy? Like, do we ensure that we pay minimum wage, at least in every role? That we don't have any roles that are below minimum wage. You know what I mean? How do we track our race and gender demographics against, how do we track it, first of all? Then how do we set targets? How do we make sure that we have a diverse talent pool for new jobs? How do we hire for new roles? How do we ensure that, our community is represented not only in the team on the field, but in the executive team? That's all purpose to me. I think you, and then if you think about social impact, I've come out of 10-15 years working in a space where that was often a tricky question, like, how do you measure impact? And you had a spectrum, right? At one end of the spectrum are the 3-5 year longitudinal studies with academic institutions, which are too long to have any, practical application when it comes to finding sponsorships. And then you have sponsors who will say, oh, just give me a nice couple of pictures for my annual report and I'll give you the money. I think we all want something a bit more practical and successful than either of those approaches. And there are, thankfully now, increasingly people out there who can provide that. So we're working with an external firm which specializes in understanding how to aggregate quantitative and qualitative data to give you a picture of your output, which is more holistic. And that includes your community impact, but it also includes things like equity statistics and, you know, how your employees feeling and what's your demographic makeup, all these things. So they're actually creating a custom dashboard for us right now, which involves us understanding, like, what are the things we're trying to measure first of all, and then what are the indicators of that, and then how do we set benchmarks and how do we track against time. So that's a process which is ongoing. And the next phase of that for me, well, there's a couple more phases for me. One is there are also organizations out there which do a bit more kind of deeper work in both using organizational data, but then also scraping social data, which is available, and being able to quantify something which is difficult, which is, you know, what are sports organizations for? What is the value they provide in a community, and how do you measure that? You know, all these sort of cultural institutions, a museum, a gallery, a concert venue, a sports team, how do you, you know, quantify that value? And the problem with the system that we've created in the world is that we don't quantify and value those things in the same way as we do purely commercial output. And that's a problem for us, and it's got us to a point where, you know, the world is not in a great place. So I'm happy to see that there are now increasingly both the data and the acceptance of the understanding that value is more than just dollars and cents. And it's, if you think about kind of value to a community, especially, that you need to consider other things. So for us, when we believe that it's appropriate and we're at the suitable level of experience and impact, like, that's where I want to take it. And then further than that, you have things like B Corp certification. So the B Corp movement here is about really holding businesses to account in terms of how they operate across every level. So ensuring that you don't just have, you know, a nice community project, but a terrible extractive supply chain. You have to think about every aspect of your organization in that way. That's probably phase 3 for us. And, you know, some of these things, particularly around sustainability and our environmental footprint, we're really at the beginning of the journey. But ultimately, the goal is to get to a point where you really talk about the value of our company through a purpose lens. So it's not, you know, and you know, our financial success, ideally, and even our sporting success is part of that whole concept. It's not, did we win, did we lose, did we make money, what did we do in the community? All of that is going to be taken together. So the processes for us are understanding what we're actually trying to do and what we're trying to measure, working with people with the expertise, if it's not in-house, in order to understand how to do that effectively. And again, thankfully, there are people out there who can do that. And then moving kind of as boldly as we can to a place where, I mean, as I talked about, my ambition is measuring us by the health, equity, and happiness of the city of Oakland. I mean, that's how I want us to be measured. And winning or losing is in there. Our technical director will have a different understanding of where it is, but it's not number one. It's a big part of our value, but it's not number one. But we believe that by focusing on this higher purpose, we'll actually be better across all of those metrics: financial, sporting, everything. We will outperform because we focused on the purpose.
Yeah, and in order to measure the health, equity, and happiness of the community of Oakland, and at least the people that you're in direct contact with and able to influence and engage with, that would be a pretty incredible organization measure for any organization of any size to have. But you guys are obviously, you know, on track because it's embedded right from the very start in what you're there to do. And that's, you know, that's just, I think, a really powerful message for anybody that's starting out as an entrepreneur or in a small business that has significant potential for growth. What can you do now to guide the impact that you want your organization to have, even though you can't measure it right now? But what actions can you take that start to take little steps towards that every day? Two last things. A couple of words you brought up. One that was experience, another was impact. And firstly, a clarification, I think, just for our listeners, which is I want to differentiate between social impact and purpose, and foundations and purpose, and community and purpose. And you already did that a little bit, Mike. But social impact is an outcome. Social impact is a long-term outcome, something you aspire to, something probably connects to your vision and to things, the impact you want your organization to have on the world. Purpose is the foundational motivator and driver for getting there. It isn't the same thing. The community is a vehicle, a group of people you engage with to bring it to life. And there's lots of other stakeholders. And so my question is around experience. It's around stakeholders. You've talked about the three parts of a typical professional sports franchise and how purpose can be a nice kind of North Star and anchor to unify them from the early stages. When you start thinking about the broader stakeholders beyond those three segments of the organization, but thinking about the fans, thinking about the sponsors, thinking about the community, but also thinking about the players and the front office and everything else, how have you been able to use your purpose to help kind of drive and galvanize that fan experience, or sorry, that experience, that stakeholder experience, which obviously is probably different for each stakeholder, but how have you been able to tie those into the purpose and make those meaningful experiences for some of those stakeholders that you feel, is nudging you guys forward, both in terms of the team performance, but also the broader organizational performance that you're measuring?
Yeah, I mean, the key to that initially was the game day experience. We are a sports team. We exist because people want to come to game day, and it was important for us that game day experience felt like Oakland, felt like a place where people wanted to come and hang out. And so thinking about the brand, where we played, the place we choose to play our games was a purpose-driven decision. There are many, many challenges, and Google our first game of the season, you'll see an example of that. There are many challenges to where we play, but there's also many benefits in terms of history of the location, where it's geographically located, how accessible it is, and we make sure that experience feels like something that's welcoming, that's for everybody, that thinks about local vendors, local artists, that has a vibe which is very welcoming. Everything to do with that experience was the physical embodiment of our purpose, and that came at the end of a lot of I used the term anthropology earlier. It's just showing up, basically, and there's no substitute for showing up. We showed up for a long time and talked to people and got to a point where people knew who we were and trusted us and knew that we were going to be present at places. And that, combined with the experience they had on game day, other teams don't have rappers performing at minor league soccer, or they don't throw out hot dogs into the crowd. They don't have mariachi bands or bandas, or it was a different type of experience. And that was the first phase. And then the second one was in 2020, when everything shut down, the pandemic, and then the racial justice protests that happened. That was a really interesting moment for sports in general, and for us it was easier for us to respond to that moment than other sports teams, I think, at that time. And it seems crazy to think of it right now. Teams were not posting Black Lives Matter on their social accounts. There was still this period where teams were tying themselves in knots, trying to figure out how to not annoy one group of stakeholders by supporting another. And again, this goes back to the challenge of having a disconnect between what's at the heart of your organization and what you ostensibly stand for. That was an easier moment for us to respond to. And I think people appreciated what we did during the quote unquote downtime. I mean, first of all, we were very grateful that we didn't have to lay anyone off. And this is thanks to our investors. During the pandemic, we didn't lay off a single person because of the pandemic. We sort of doubled down on what can we do in the community, even though we can't play soccer. And so we stayed relevant during that time. And provided people with interesting ways to engage with the team that were perhaps a little bit different from what other teams were doing, and built this sort of trust that that was kind of who we are and what the brand was. And constantly, we're constantly trying to innovate and do things differently, and think on a very ambitious level about how we behave and how we act, and the types of, we're fortunate to have some pretty high profile ambassadors or owners or people who've repped the brand, and people, I think, have taken notice of that. And so, I would say game day initially, or the physical manifestation of the brand through initially merch. I mean, people often, when we get people giving us grief on social media, it's often like, "Oh, you're a t-shirt company," like that is something that gets thrown at us. But having a physical manifestation, having a physical way for people to interact with the brand is important. And merchandise is part of that for us. Most of our merchandise is slightly different than just flogging a name on a shirt. But then game day experience is vital. Our response, if you like, or our kind of like what happened during the pandemic, and the way we sort of doubled down on our purpose and used that as a time to really, again, interrogate our purpose and think about the type of organization we wanted to be, was part of it. And then, thinking deeply about the organization in terms of how we show up, thinking about our player experience. What is our responsibility to our players? Not only to just say, well, we're not going to punish you for having a position on civil issues, but how do we actually support you? How do we provide you with education? What is the experience we want our players to go through? How do we think about their mental health? How do we think about their career post sports? These are all things that we've invested in doing, and we're trying to build that relationship between the community and the team. And this is something that was kind of like forged in 2020 when we couldn't even play soccer. We couldn't even have the team do the thing that they normally do. So how do we ensure that we build that relationship in a way that people are going to care about this team, where before they're even, when they're not even seeing them. I mean, we haven't even played a game this year at our home stadium for various reasons. You can look them up, and it's been hard. But what has sustained us through that period is the connection that we've built with the community and the trust they have in the team. And this is where it pays off, right? This is where you see the benefit of taking this approach, because if you were behaving purely transactionally, if the only value of the only relationship you have with your fans is come out on game day, buy a ticket, buy food and drink, and then go home, then you're not going to survive the challenging moments. So it is paramount to us that we have that at the heart of our value proposition.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, when COVID hit and all of the social justice movements and everything kind of were culminating all at the same time, that the fact that you could, show up authentically in a timely fashion, in a relevant fashion, and in a meaningful fashion meant you could do it. You could just do it, and you didn't have to overthink it. Other than the fact that, all right, well, how can we support our stakeholders that are all going through these challenges, and how can we, lead with our players, support our players to help other people through the process? So, I've got so many questions for you off the back of this. I'm literally in the process of writing a white paper on purpose-driven models for sports, right, around experiences, but also around players, and a number of the different things you touched on. So we're going to have to completely have a sidebar on that, and I'll need to get some quotes for you from you for it as well. But we're close to time here, so I do want to get to the last question, which is a personal question for you, and you can answer this in one or two ways. You can either just read off your own purpose statement if you have one, and then break it down if you like, or you can answer these questions directly. But for individual purpose, we simplify purpose as what we call PurposeFused Formula. So it's purpose equals passion plus application plus impact. Passion is what you care about, what you believe in, what you enjoy. Impact is how you want to show up in the world, the difference that you want to make on a me, we, and world level, depending on your aspirations. And And the application is the so what. What have you been able to do, and what are you able to do, kind of on a day-to-day basis, to get the intersection of those two things and actually make them a reality. So, if you want to answer in a sentence or in one word or up to one sentence for each of those, if Mike Geddes was to define himself in terms of passion, application, and impact, what would you say?
The passion, I think, is I often use the word humanity when I talk about why sport is important, especially these days. You know, we've spent hundreds of years constructing a society which essentially removes humanity, which turns, you know, it focuses on turning individuals into factories essentially, and we've constructed a society which encourages us to deny our common humanity, and you know, I think our politics and our society today is an example of that. And everyone sees the value when you transcend that system, whether it's through art or through music or through sport or anything that makes you realize, oh, fundamentally we're all the same. Yeah, of course we are. And I feel privileged to work in something like sport because it allows us the ability to cut through these barriers, these divisions that society has created. And so, you know, working in a business which has essentially humanity at its heart is a privilege. So humanity, I think, is the passion. Remind me of the other things, Mark. What were the other words?
Application and impact.
Yeah,
so application, how you bring it to life, and impact is the
so
what.
I mean, I've, you know, for a long time I was focused on working at the biggest sort of macro level possible, and one of the other things I love about sports, especially football, is it is the biggest kind of macro thing that we've got. You know, it is one of the biggest common experiences on planet Earth, and allows you to think at a big scale. It's very transferable, and I have been interested, and I'm still interested in, you know, how do you do the most good with the life that you've got. So big scale and big ambition has always driven me, but then latterly I've also understood the value of going deeper and you know, really understanding the I guess the roots of issues. And one of the things that I've been fortunate about working for the Roots is it's enabled me to understand the place in which I live and my family lives much better. It's given me the ability to understand how the structures of our society work at the local level, and it's really been an education for me, and I think that doing the most good, if that doesn't sound too trite, or like making the biggest impact, I understand now that it's not just about kind of global. You got to think local as well, and everyone's just got to play your part, and wherever you can make that change, then that's meaningful, and you want to be as impactful as possible. You want to you know, I'm not going to use the phrase change lives because it's overused, but just, you know, contribute in a meaningful way to making the world a better place. That is trite, sorry, but you know, that is the impact for me, is doing things authentically, doing the most good you can, making a real difference. That, I guess, is the so what. It's on all of us to do that, especially those of us with privilege, of which I've had a you know, more than my fair share. How do we make sure that we're all every day in the process of making the world a more equitable place? That, I think, is on all of us. So that's
so Mike Geddes, in nearly 3 words, is humanity. Passion is humanity. His application is around contribution, whether it's at scale or locally, whether it's broad scale or whether it's narrow and deep, and that the impact is an authentic betterment of the world, a more equitable world, is what that all drives to.
There we go.
Brilliant, Mike. Right, yeah, there's definitely a take 2 on this. Well, not take 2, a part 2. Hopefully we don't have to do a take 2. I really appreciate your time. There's so many pieces of this that I think are so applicable, not just to other sports franchises and to national governing bodies and program design specialists and people in the sports space, social impact world that we both came from, but also to business, and so many other areas, because so much of this stuff in terms of the process and how you embed purpose at the core, and especially at the beginning of a journey, is applicable across the board. So really appreciate your time, Mike. Really appreciate your insights. Obviously being involved with and following your career with interest over the years, and just, genuine thank you for what you do. And I don't want that to sound trite. I mean it, because I know it generally has changed lives and it has impacted communities. And I think this next journey for you obviously is an incredible way to do that, where you live, where you've set your roots, and doing that through an organisation that's essentially blazing the trail for everyone else. So, Mike Geddes, thank you for your time today.
Pleasure, Mark. Thanks very much.
Take care, mate. Cheers.
And learn more about the power of purpose at PurposeFused.com.